We move the Wednesday, December 9th meeting to Tuesday, December 8th. So may I have a motion and a second on item 1.1.1?
I move 1.1.1.
I'll second.
Any discussion? No? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And may I have a motion on item 1.1.2, which is to adopt the revised 2020-21 school year calendar, which extends the Wednesday half days through January 30th.
I'll move.
And I'll second. Any discussion? Christine, is there something I missed from that?
Yeah, I guess, so we made the decision back in August that we would need to move to a half-day schedule on Wednesday because particularly of our potting at the elementary and middle school level. We needed to have time in the afternoon to conduct our regular school business as well as to support our teachers with their professional development around our new instructional models. So we're still open, so we're still in a space where we need to leverage that time in order to effectively serve our students and support our staff. So that's why I am recommending that we continue on with that pattern as we push through the next 2 months. I'm also going to talk a little bit later today in the presentation how we need to leverage Wednesday potentially differently in order to facilitate testing for the district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So all in favor of the revised calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and now just a quick update on the town's form-based code and what the school district has done so far. We've reported fairly extensively on this in the past meeting, so I just want to say that the school district submitted we commented on 2 public hearings, the one on October 27th and on November 10th, and we submitted written comments in 2 letters, one dated October 29th and one dated November 17th. So I just want to let everyone know that we will be pushing this out to the community by end of the week. We'll be sending you an email with an attachment containing both letters explaining what the school district has commented on thus far. Let's see if there's anything else I have to say about that.
I have a question.
No, that's all I have to report on the form-based code. Warren?
So we sent that to each of the town board members, correct?
That's correct.
And has anyone heard anything back? Because I think all I've seen was we received a cut and pasted form letter from the deputy town clerk after us acknowledging our letter.
I believe that's all we've received.
No one else has heard anything from me?
Yeah.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah. Okay, anyone have any further comments on that? Okay, Christine?
Okay, so we have our superintendent's report.
No, just, you have to stay on the form.
Oh, no.
We're not quite done yet?
Yeah. Maybe I would just share with you that our consultant team is meeting tomorrow. The board has continued to give feedback, and they are we're in the midst of finishing the capacity study, so they have a team meeting as they begin to progress here to give you the information you need as soon as possible.
Okay. And I think we just have one more item under the president's report. Jane has something to report from the sports boosters.
Yeah, just very briefly, I know that we had a boosters meeting. I'm the esports boosters liaison from the board, and we had a sports boosters meeting yesterday. I know there were some questions, and people have received that about winter sports, and obviously that is run by by Section 1, and there was a meeting, I know, yesterday that resulted in some news out today in terms of winter sports, which is that, low to moderate risk sports were approved to go forward, such as bowling, swimming, but we can't, they pushed, the more high-risk sports and indoor sports until not before January, and there's probably be updates on that as well, which Christine may talk to at some point. But the main point that I wanted to say was that I really wanted to give a big shout out to a lot of people that our fall sports season, which is wrapping up now, was really a tremendous success. And I know that it's been important to a lot of the students and the coaches and a lot of people to have some sort of normalcy if possible with the fall sports season. And I really feel proud of what everyone here did, from Christine to the PD staff to the athletic staff. And Jason Simo was saying that we had 10,000 individuals come through here during the fall that were screened pursuant to our procedures, and it went successfully. The PD team came up with a great way to come up with spreadsheets to categorize so everyone could be tracked and traced, and the QR codes and the whole system was really exceptional. I know they were complimented on it many times, but I just wanted to say a big thank you to Christine and our staff, to Jason, to Diane Lugo, for really making the entire fall sports season for the sports that could play really a tremendous success. And I feel that we really do have to highlight a lot of the good things that people are doing under very challenging circumstances. So I just wanted to say that. And obviously with the winter sports, there are things that are out of control. We don't have them in our venues, whether it's swimming that has to be at another pool location, or skiing on a mountain, or indoor track at another location. That is out of our hands, and I know it's very frustrating for a lot of the parents and the athletes, but I really wanted to thank the athletic department for everything that they did to make fall sports a real success.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, Kate. I think it's so important to highlight the good things and to give recognition to all of the good and very difficult work that people have done to get around this pandemic. And so along those lines, I just want to mention that I think we're on week 12 now with schools open. We have a 100% in-person model, K through 8, 50-50 hybrid at the high school. And I think this is very unusual. We're one of the very few districts who are able to do this. And we're very lucky that we can do it for several reasons. We know that we're a highly resourced district. We have the funds and we have the space to socially distance, but we have highly, highly dedicated staff, our administrators, our faculty, and we have to also thank our parent community and the students for keeping up with all of the updates and following all of the information. So I just want to thank everybody in the entire district. This has been such a great team effort, and we'll keep going for as long as we can. We have seen that there have been infections, but that's always been part of the plan to manage that, to work with the health department, and that's what we've been doing. I just want to say we're extremely grateful to absolutely everyone for helping us to keep on in this way. And see how long we can keep going.
Yep, absolutely.
So I will turn to Christine for the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. So Adam and I have a few updates before I introduce Andrew Priscilla, who will give an overview of some of the work that's been happening at the high school over the course of the first quarter. I want to acknowledge Ellen and Tony aren't here today. They are at home. We just have to start to be a little bit more strategic in who is present in spaces due to quarantining. So we want to make sure that if there was a reason that we had to quarantine here as a group, that there would be staff at the district office to support the students and the parents. So we're working out a schedule right now where we're going to be rotating in and out of our meetings.
So they're the designated survivors.
They are the designated survivors this evening. All right, so just a staffing update. Usually Tony does this chart. We're still pretty consistent with where we are in terms of staff in the building. We have one vacancy at the elementary level due to a retirement. We're in the process of hopefully having someone to you at the next meeting for appointment. And I know that the high school is finishing up a search process for their special education teachers. So we're hoping at the next meeting we'll have both of those appointments for your consideration. Just in terms of a schedule update, I've been doing this at every meeting. As Vicki had shared with you, we're 100% fully in person K through 8 with students self-selecting to be remote. We're at 50-50 at the high school, but we have made some adjustments and we've been able to offer students who need additional support to come to school every day. So I want to thank Andrew and Ellen for being able to reshape some of what the day looks like in order to have some of our students that need maybe additional support be able to have in-person attendance fully for the full day. At the middle schools, Adam will talk with you about some adjustments we're going to make in the morning on Wednesday. And at the elementary schools, we determined based on what's been happening with our closures, we need to approach remote instruction a little bit differently than at the middle and high school levels because the kids are having a hard time staying on Zoom. live all day long. So Adam will talk with you about some potential adjustments we're going to push out to the community if those buildings need to close for a day or for a longer period of time, so it's more age appropriate to our students. Just a few updates in terms of procedures. As you know, or we pushed out, if you had an opportunity to read one of my recent emails, we've updated our COVID website so that parents and staff can have alerts when we post new letters. So if you're a parent in one building but you want to know what's happening everywhere, you can certainly just fill out that, click that little bell by the letter, on the letter section of the COVID site and sign up, and you'll get an alert every time we put a posting there. That's been working really well for us, and I think it's addressed one of the communication needs that our families and our staff felt we needed to consider moving forward. The district staff is all on Operu. That will be our new operating screening system that will be rolling out to our parents in the near future. The reason we need to use this application is because right now with the Google Doc, you can't tell who didn't fill them out, but with Operu you can. So with Operu, it'll give us a list of students and staff who miss filling out the screener every day, and that's really important to us as we move forward, particularly as the cases begin to rise in the district. And this has been working nicely for us currently as we get used to using it before we roll it out to our families. And then finally, if you came in today, you got to see our thermal scanner. We've ordered multiple thermal scanners for our buildings. We know as it gets colder, it'll be harder for us to do temperature readings outside. And we also know it's important now as we move further and we head into the winter months that we have another layer on our staff. So all of our students and staff entering the building will now go through these thermal temperature scanners, just as another layer of support to ensure that we're being as safe as possible. So we anticipate having these all set up throughout the district next week, the latest the week we get back from Thanksgiving. So I did want to mention that for families that are traveling outside of the states where you don't need to quarantine over Thanksgiving, they should definitely indicate that their kids are going to be remote the week we return, because there's a quarantine process that needs to take place, whether parents are going to decide to keep their kids out for 14 days or they're going to leverage the early release from quarantine by securing negative COVID testing. Either way, if parents are leaving the state with their children and they're traveling outside of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont, they should absolutely indicate that their kids will be remote when we return so that they have enough time to go through whatever process they choose to ensure their kids can come back to school safely. And so I'm going to be pushing out another, I already sent this out, but I'm going to push out another message before Thanksgiving holiday, because it's very important that parents adhere to this guidance, because this will keep us all safe. We've already had this conversation with our staff as well today. So Adam has created one of these Excel spreadsheets that can demonstrate for you our patterns of students that are in quarantine and staff. So Adam, do you want to just explain?
Yeah, sure, thank you.
What this is? Go ahead.
Yeah, so what this is, there's a long tail to the left there of dates from when school started where we didn't have any students in quarantine, we didn't have any staff members in quarantine, we didn't have any cases in the district. So this graph actually starts on 10/1, and what it's showing is the number of staff members and number of students that we have quarantined as a result of coming in contact with a positive case. So although our number of cases are very small as a district, you can see them by looking at the letters that Christine had just shared on the website. In some cases, the number of students and staff members that impacts is fairly large. So you can see that over time, as we had various positive cases, the requirement is to quarantine for 14 days. So the first student you have, you could see, kind of count out the 14 days. And then as other people tested positive, you can see how that impacts the organization. So you can kind of find the date. We're hoping if we had no more cases, then they would drop off as people came off from quarantine, but we anticipate obviously that we will have additional cases. So this is just our way of looking at kind of across the entire district at gives us the ability to identify how many students are impacted and how many staff members are impacted. And you can see now we're actually down from a high of about 425. We're actually down from there, but we did have some recent cases, and so it ticked up just a little bit. So we're going to continue to track it, helps us understand what's going on across our schools.
We also were finding when we have cases, the largest quarantine numbers are at the middle school. So we have kids and staff that need to quarantine because of exposure, and then we have students who need to go remote because staff need to quarantine. And so we can't support the instruction. So that's where these large numbers are. But as we move through positive cases, we get smarter about how we're managing the schedule. So we have seen a reduction in the number of students who need to go out due to exposure. So for example, we just had today an exposure at Grafflin and an exposure at West Orchard. Very small numbers, less than 10 needed to go out. Where in the past, that exposure might have been bigger. So we're learning as we go here. Go ahead, Hillary.
Do you anticipate with what you mentioned with Thanksgiving travel and the need to quarantine that we will have enough staff who are leaving the safe state zone that it will impact kids needing to be remote from a staffing procedure?
Right. So in order to, we can't insert ourselves in staff travel plans, but the return and the process to return to the district and how we code that is really important. So we have an idea right now of how many staff need to go through a process because they're traveling outside of the, I don't know, the zone that you don't need to order
Tri-state areas.
It's very few. We have two. We have two. But who knows what will happen between now and when people need to start making some decisions and letting us know. There's a provision in federal law that has a way for people to leverage leave to be able to quarantine but still receive compensation. But in order to do that, they have to go through a process with Tony. So we'll have a good idea how many staff are intending to do that as we head towards next week. And if for some reason we're in a space where we can't open, we won't. But right now, I don't anticipate that would be a problem. I think that most of our staff are making travel plans in accordance with what's happening around us. And the governor's been very clear about this for at least a month. So it's my hope we'll have very few people in this situation.
Thank you for the graph. I think it's really helpful.
Oh, you want to put the graph back up?
I think that it's interesting to note that the graph is going down significantly in numbers because I guess across the country, infection rates are going up.
Yeah.
So I find that interesting. Of course, I'm very glad. We're all very glad to see that.
Is that arrow where we are now?
Yeah, that arrow is pointing at today.
Oh,
Which
I did not understand
Yep,
that.
the
I
arrow's
thought
pointing at today, but it is, you see the number of students in staff quarantine is actually, it is down. It kind of peaked and then it came back down.
it's down. But
But
so what are the subsequent numbers to the right? Is that what you're anticipating based on where we are today?
Those are students that are coming off quarantine. So as they're quarantined for 14 days, those are actual students and staff members that we can project out. So those
So
are
we
real
have
numbers.
no idea that it would be that low.
It
because
will
that
likely
just
not.
didn't make sense to me.
That's right. That would be if we didn't have any additional cases, we would have all of our students back in the district on December 1st.
So the
That's what that
likelihood is
shows.
by the time we get to that date, I can't see the date from here, it's very small, but.
It goes all the way out to the
be
end of November.
To be realistic, by the time we get to the end of November, that's not where those graph points will be.
That's right.
And you know what we could do? We could just show you this every meeting, right? Like we are doing this a few other slides, just so you can just have an idea of what we're
This is a great
what we
slide.
navigating.
I think we need to
No,
know.
thank you for doing that.
I just have one clarification question. Is that students who are quarantined, or is it staff students that are quarantined because of exposure? Or does that include students that had to go remote because their teacher needs quarantine?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is just the students that are required quarantines. We have some additional students because of, especially at the middle school, where we have like a team of teachers who had contact, so the team was quarantined. So we had about half of the team in some cases quarantined. The other half of the team has just gone remote because all of the teachers are remote. So Yeah, this graph doesn't show the students impacted by the learning remote at home and not officially quarantined. But we could add that, or even show a different graphic.
It's really only that's really only happening in middle schools, that has such a large impact.
No, we've had that happen at the elementary
Oh.
school as well.
It might be useful to see how many students are forced remote for exposure reasons, even if it's not the individual that's exposed.
Okay, sure. All right, so I want to talk, now this is complicated. What I'm going to share with you is complicated because we don't have a lot of good information on this, but it's important that I share with you tonight what's happening because I'm going to push a communication out on Thursday or Friday to the community. So, as we all know, Governor Cuomo is monitoring infection rates, and he has a metric to do that. And as he gets concerned, or the Department of Health gets concerned with the infection rate in a particular community, we start to become color-coded into zones. So the first level of concern is a yellow zone, then it's an orange zone, and then it's a red zone. And in the state, we're all in different tiers based on population. So we're in tier 1 because we're in Westchester. So in the simplest way to do this, is there's a side panel that has some other information. Basically, in our region, if we have a 7-day rolling average for positivity above 2.5% for 10 days, and we have a certain number of cases, daily cases per 100,000, on a 7-day average, we move into the yellow zone. And that's what I need to talk with you about today. So if you move into the yellow zone, in order to stay open, we need to test. So let me just show you an example of where we can go to get information to kind of get a sense of where we're heading. So initially, the state and the state government said, we are going to determine if you're going to be zoned by region. And so they came up with this chart where you could look at theoretically your region and you can monitor the infection rate to see if, let me just, good. Okay. Here we go, Western. Good. Okay, now, initially they created this graph here, and you could go to the graph and you could check to see where you are, and you can monitor this. So we would be able to say, okay, we're getting close to the yellow zone. We're going to hit it soon. But since they came up with this method, the Albany shifted their process. Because the thinking was, well, if hypothetically Yonkers is in the yellow zone because of their infection rate, but Chappaqua is not having that problem, why should Chappaqua be in the yellow zone and have to test? Which I think makes sense. But they haven't updated the system. So basically, there are districts that are moving into the yellow zone, but they don't have enough, I'm going to use the term warning, because there's no system to check to understand what the infection rate projection is. Let me just show you. Let me show you another. Let me just show you what happens. So this is an example of what could potentially happen. So we could, these are cluster zones, and all this is online. So what could happen to us is that I could get a call saying, we're in a yellow zone from the Department of Health. And they're typically making those calls on Wednesday. And that would tell me that in order for us to stay open, I need to test, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Or we could get a call that something happened that was incredible over the course of a few days, and we were in an orange zone or a red zone. And then I would immediately have to shut up. And there'd be a different process to be able to reopen. That would also involve testing, but it would be much more expensive. And what's happening is that districts are either being put in the yellow zone because of their infection rate, or they're being put in the yellow zone because they're close to an orange or a red zone, and they need to monitor the outskirts to make sure that the outskirts aren't starting to have a significant rise in the infection rate. So for example, let's say Mount Pisco goes into the orange zone. We could have schools on the periphery be placed in the yellow because they need to monitor those particular addresses. So it is possible that if we have an orange zone somewhere around us, that Seven Bridges could be in a yellow zone, but West Orchard might not be. So these are all things we have to think about as we try to plan forward.
So Christine, just very quickly, so the state is going to monitor by area, not by school district.
Yes,
So they could split up a school district.
they monitor it almost like by address. So this is how we're going to approach this issue. Okay, so this is our current thinking. So first of all, on the agenda tonight is a contract with Pulse, MD. If we're going to test here on site, in order to stay open if we move into the yellow, I think it's important that we have a professional company provide oversight for that process for the district. And that's why I'm going to recommend to you that we hire Pulse to do that. Because not only will they come, train our nurses, contact families of positive students and staff, but they will do the reporting for the Department of Health that's required. They provide malpractice insurance, and then they'll have an expert on site. They'll either have a doctor or a physician assistant to assist our nurses who will be supporting the testing process. So that's the first piece of trying to move forward here in a way that makes sense, securing someone that can help us facilitate this, who has professional expertise in testing. So that's step number one. So this is my thinking on how we would make this work. So the way that I would find out right now, which could change, but right now, is that they would call me on a Wednesday, and they would say, Christine, these schools or your entire district are in a yellow. You're in the yellow zone, and then I would have 2 weeks past 20% of students and staff who are on site. So I get the call on Wednesday. So then the following Wednesday, that would be our testing day. So the way I see that working for us is that in the morning, we would have all students remote, and we would have the staff on site teaching. And we would use that full day to have our staff and students tested by our nurses with Pulse MD providing that oversight. Now, depending on how many schools are involved, we would likely have that take place here at Forest Greeley High School. And we would set up a process to do that, which we're still ironing out. And by waiting a week, that gives us time to secure the test from the Department of Health, because they're supposed to provide them for us. It gives us time to determine who in the district K through 12 will be remote for 2 weeks, because our sample size is based on students who attend on site. So if we are in the yellow zone, parents will have to commit for 2 weeks, not just one. That includes Greeley. It will give us an opportunity to have a sign-up process and a consent process. So our initial approach would be to see if we have students and staff who would want to volunteer to be tested. And it's 20% per site, it's not per district, it's per address. And before I would have to assign people to be tested, which would be necessary if we didn't reach the 20% threshold. And then it would give us time to like logistically plan out how we're going to do this and be able to push information out to the community. So that's the thought process without a lot of guidance from state ed on how to get this done. I think the first step in moving forward with being able to do this is securing Pulse MD to be able to help us facilitate the testing. Now there's so many nuances to what I just said. There's like reporting that we have to do to state ed. There's reporting that has to happen with the Department of Health. There's reporting out to parents who have students who are positive. There's reporting out to parents of negative tests. There is a way to have to test kids through the a less invasive nasal swab, but then get them off campus because I can't have students being tested on campus and waiting for results, because if they're positive, then they're on campus potentially spreading it. So like there's a lot that has to happen before I can say, okay, this is how we're going to do it, but I can't get moving on how we're going to do it until we secure the way we're going to do it, which is what I'm recommending you do tonight by supporting Pulse MD to be able to move forward with.
So Christine, students from all schools would have to come to Horace Greeley to get tested?
If their school is in the yellow zone.
Oh.
However, let's say only Grappling is in the yellow zone. Then on Wednesday, the 5 other schools will be in session, and then the testing will take place only at Grappling. So it's only the building of where testing needs to occur that will be fully remote that day so that we could facilitate the assessments.
I just want to make sure I understand. This all sounds great, and thank you for taking on yet another task in the midst of all this. I just want to make sure I understood you right, that until, like in that first week before the testing, the kids could still go to school because we have to just facilitate that testing within the 2-week period as of now?
That's right. I was
Okay.
confused whether they had to immediately go remote
No.
until that test was completed. Okay.
We have to immediately go remote if we're orange or red.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
So basically, we have a 2-week window to get this done. So what I like about our plan, even though it's not complete, it's like the bones, right? We got to flush this thing out more. Is that we have a week to get ready, then we test. Then we have the opportunity to see if we have any problems, and then we have another week to fix the problems to make sure that we have enough students and staff tested before we are in a place where we have to report our results. And so under the rules that were released, the new rules that were released at 9 p.m. on Saturday, if our test results are below the positivity rate that triggered the yellow, we don't have to test anymore. But if they're above it, then the next 2 weeks we have to test again. So that's the process. I think what we need to do is we need to try our best to stay open. And we need to only close if we have to. So this allows us to do that. Now, if we're in the orange zone or the red zone, that's a whole different thought pattern that's going to be going on here, because even though if you're in the orange zone on the 5th day, you can reopen if everyone tests negative. I don't know if we're going to want to do that, but I do know that if we're in the yellow, we should absolutely try to stay open.
Right, do our best.
And we should 100% work to facilitate this, even though it's going to be very challenging and it's something that we've never done before. That hasn't stopped us yet.
Now, Christina, is this going on anywhere else that's the yellow zone? So that we can try to learn from them or their best practices?
So in Port Chester, they're remote. There is one school in Buffalo that I think was able to facilitate testing. But in Monroe, I'm not really sure if they had some issues. I know that Monroe Woodbury was about to facilitate testing and they moved out of the yellow. And I believe Curious Joel came up with a process. It's a little bit different than this in order to open back up. But there haven't been many schools who've been pushed into the yellow yet in our region. I don't know anyone else right now that has a plan like ours, but I know everyone's working on it. I just feel very fortunate that we were able to secure Pulse MD to help facilitate this for us, because the other option, which we absolutely applied for just in case we needed to, was that we could become our own lab site. So John and I had Dr. Levine fill out the paperwork just in case we got into a bind and we couldn't secure a contractor to help us support this process. But luckily, Pulse MD, they were really creative with us to figure out a way to do this that we all felt safe. And they put enough flexibility in that contract because we're not really sure, because we haven't gone through this yet and the process isn't as clear as what it needs to be. There's flexibility in the payment process based on what we actually need them to do, which I really appreciated in the construct of that contract, understanding that. No, who's ever done this before?
I know, well,
It's a new way to fulfill the lab requirement, right?
Right.
Get all the high school kids swabbing people.
Yeah.
No, but we thank you. I know we all got to take a look at this contract, so I can't imagine how hard you've been working on this, but the contract is in a fraught area and uncharted territory. It's spelled out very well. It's beneficial. It seems like something we can work with, and that will allow us to stay open, which is incredible. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
it's truly unprecedented what you've been doing, and, without too many examples or any at all on how to get this done, and without too much guidance from the state.
Yeah, and
So-
we found out we developed this connection through a parent. So it's a community effort. This is not just us trying to figure out how to handle everything that's being tossed at us. It's the whole community. It's all of us.
Yeah, well,
It's our
thank you to that
parents,
parent.
it's our students, it's our staff, it's our Board of Education. It's all of us trying to figure this out together. And I have to tell you, our parents have been really understanding and supportive every step of the way here. Every time we make a decision. And sometimes that's not your experience, but with this particular health crisis that we've been dealing with, our parents have been tremendous in supporting all of us. Even when we have to call them and tell them that their kids have to quarantine.
Yeah,
We're really very grateful. Okay. All right, so then Adam just wanted to briefly just talk about a few just general academic updates and some scheduling adjustments that we're going to be making moving forward. So go ahead, Adam.
Great, thank you. So this also goes under the umbrella of things that we've never done before. It's a little bit of a pivot from what Christine was just talking about. We are still required to have an observation process for all of our faculty members. So that requirement didn't go away. The annual professional performance review requirement from the state is still in place. And so all of our teachers need to be observed more than once every year, two times for tenured teachers and 3 for probationary teachers. But that presented a problem of lots of exposure as we moved administrators through buildings and through classrooms. And so we asked our faculty if they'd volunteer for virtual observation. So what we're able to do is to zoom into a bunch of classrooms. We had over 150 teachers volunteer to have their observation done this way. And we had 7 teams of observers. They were our administrators, but they weren't necessarily tied to that particular building, so we were able to do observations through the whole district. The teachers signed up for kind of big windows of time where we could potentially pop in. They gave us a little bit of information about what they'd be teaching, the grade level, the subject area, and then an administrator zoomed in. One of the really neat things about that was, number one, it really did cut the exposure completely out of the picture. We were able to do this from our offices, but it also gave us a really interesting view from the remote students' perspective, because we were zooming in with the remote students or the students that would have been in the cohort pod, for example. So it was terrific to see our teachers use all the technology that we worked so hard to put in place and to get secure over the summer. So a lot of great software that they're using, a lot of great technology with the document cameras and web cameras and things like that we put in place, and it really was very seamless. It was just an amazing thing to see. It looks like teachers have been teaching like this for a long, long time, even though they've only been doing it for just a couple of months. So those are just a few shots that you see up there. All right, no, it's quite all right. So the second thing, I'm going to pivot a little bit here to the Wednesday early dismissals. So we have those in place for all of our schools, and they provide critical time in the Wednesday afternoons for teacher meetings, parent meetings, curriculum work, professional development. They're really important. I appreciate the board considering the extension of those. We were very successful at the elementary level and also at Greeley in launching a schedule that continues to work really well. At the middle school, we are recommending that we make an adjustment to that schedule so that the community will want to know. One of the most important parts here is we're not changing the start time on Wednesday or the end time on Wednesday, so that will all be the same. What we're changing is what happens in the middle. So on the left side, you see our original Wednesday morning schedule. And you can see how many times the students transition. They have their whole day compressed into shortened periods. Periods are about 20 minutes long on the left side. And what we found was it was really hard for students to settle in, to do any kind of deep thinking and deep learning because they were pivoting that many times. Just when you get settled in, you have to move to the next phase. And it was also really challenging for our staff members because now our students are staying put and our staff members are moving. So you can imagine them moving from room to room every 20 minutes. So by the time we ended up at kind of a lunchtime period and take a little break and then we jump in for professional development, which is really hard. They had worked a full day in a compressed period of time. So the recommendation is to change that to instead run a 4-period day. You can see it on the right side. It cuts the amount of passing time from 37 minutes down to 12. So we had a tremendous amount of time that people were moving in that original schedule. There's fewer transitions, obviously. It's going to support the quality of instruction, give us opportunity to dive more deeply like we typically would do in a regular period. And it gives us a lot of flexibility to try a couple of different models. And on the next slide, we have a few choices of things that we've been brainstorming and how we would use those 4 periods. A simple way to approach it would just be to run periods 1 through 4, and then the next week rotate and run period 5, 6, 7, and some kind of advisory or extra help. Upon looking at that a little bit more deeply, what we found with that middle schedule is if we ran periods 1, 2, 7, and the advisory, then every student would have the opportunity for a chunk of extra help on that day in that advisory and extra help period. And then by running 3, 4, 5, and 6, those are also the lunch periods. So instead of providing lunch, which we wouldn't have to do because it's a half day, we can provide that extra help during the lunch period, and the core teachers are available. So we like that middle schedule. We also want to consider some creative options with maybe some choice boards and some project-based learning on that third option that's all the way to the right, where students might have a choice of some different modules. Maybe there's some extra help choices, some enrichment choices, and we could do that as part of that third model. So we're going to stick with this schedule for at least a few months to give it a try. We think it'll be a much better fit for our faculty and for our students, and then we're just going to tinker with what happens in the inside of those 4 blocks and how they rotate to maximize that. All right, so now I'm shifting gears again. So that's the whether we are in person at the middle school or we're remote at the middle school, we're going to follow that 4-period schedule on Wednesday mornings. Now I'm changing gears on you a little bit here to the K-4 remote schedule. And we've been doing, as we've seen numbers tick up in the region with COVID positive cases, we've been doing a lot of thinking about which schools and schedules will pivot well to remote and which ones might be more challenging. And at this point, we think our middle school schedule and our high school schedule will transition well. And we've had quite a few cases where we've had whole teams have to transition. We've got feedback from teachers and students that actually has worked pretty well. But we are concerned about, we've got some feedback about our K through 4 schedules and what we might have to do to make some adjustments to that experience for students. So here's some important information for the community in terms of start time, end time, and what to expect in the middle if we have to go remote at the elementary level. So the first thing is from 9:15 to 9:30, we're going to support, with an open Zoom room, we're going to support the kind of morning routine, getting ready for school. We heard from teachers that sometimes with our youngsters, it's challenging for them to have all the materials that they need. Do you have your device? Do you have your charger? Do you have your notebooks and your papers, and to be able to get themselves all settled and ready to go? So we're going to have the Zoom rooms open starting at 9:15. We'll have staff members in those rooms to greet the students and make sure they check in and have all of their things with them. Classroom teacher will start morning meeting at 9:30. We've arranged a schedule so that in K and 1, we have 30-minute instructional blocks. In 2 through 4, we're focusing more on like a 45-minute instructional block. The lessons will consist of whole group instruction, where it'll be like a whole class through a Zoom setting. Also some small groups, some conferencing, and even some independent practice. So we found with the faculty that's had some experience with this, they'll sometimes tell the student, okay, you can turn off your camera, but I want you to be in earshot so I can call you back and you have a little bit of time to do some independent writing or some independent reading, and then the teacher can call the whole class back, so that would be some independent practice. And then we're going to incorporate some snack, brain breaks, movement breaks. We're going to have synchronous specials, so that will continue. And then we're going to have kind of an end of day extra help closing circle block, and you can see the timing there for K1 and then 2 through 4. So this is a lot of text, but we just wanted to give you a sense of what some sample schedules might look like for the students. So this is the K1 schedule, and you can see in the blue sections that move through there, we tried to be very purposeful about putting in lots of breaks for the students so they could get up and move and get a snack and use the restroom throughout the day. And you can see those chunks of content are about 30 minutes for our K1 students. So that wouldn't be 30 minutes of direct instruction. That would be like more of a short mini lesson followed by some guided practice and maybe even some independent practice. So you can see how the day flows for our kindergartners and our first graders. And then this is a sample 2nd through 4th grade schedule where you see that there are fewer breaks, but there's still breaks interspersed, and then the content chunks are just a little bit bigger. They're about 45 minutes long. So you can see how the day will flow through. So we think that that's going to be a starting point for us. We think those will work pretty well for us based on our experiences in the spring and also feedback from our teachers this year for classes that have gone remote, and we'll make adjustments as we go forward as we get feedback from students and parents. So this is the last slide I'd like to just touch on, is that we've got a lot of feedback from teachers about how important it is for us to coordinate, teachers, parents, and students, about coordinating across grade and also being thoughtful about our curriculum. So we've done some work to be really purposeful about our consistency with regard to curriculum experiences. We find that it's more challenging to teach in this kind of hybrid or remote environment, and you can't cover as much content as you typically would. So our faculty needs to be really thoughtful and purposeful about covering the right things and making sure students are developing the right content and skills as they move forward. So on the left side, we've identified point people that will oversee, really continue to oversee the content areas to make sure we have that horizontal articulation. And then on the right side, vertical articulation. On the right side, we have assigned our building administrators to kind of keep an eye on and work with the teachers by level. So they'll help us coordinate across the district. So they'll be holding weekly meetings by level assigned to those administrators, just to make sure that we have that consistent experience across the schools to the extent that we go remote. So that's just some of the background that we've done to make sure that we're really fully prepared to pivot if we need to.
And so I just want to mention 2 different areas of the schedule that we were looking at, but we decided to defer any kind of decision. So the first is that we were thinking about ending the middle school day early to leverage a block to help support extra help and in clubs and activities. We were also considering assigning K1 remote students for a longer, who are committed to engaging in instruction in that way for a longer period of time to a specific teacher who would support them remotely in their core subjects based on some of the experiences we were having in the classroom. However, due to the trends that we're seeing in the community regarding schools and the amount of students that we've had to quarantine and the rise in positive cases, we've decided to hold off on moving in that direction right now. We may revisit it the second semester, but we felt that if we were to make a decision right now, that would create a transitional period for our youngest students and make a significant adjustment to our schedule for our middle school students. Considering that we may have to transition the entire district to remote at some point, we thought that it would be premature. The environment right now is not right for a decision like that, where it might have been a month ago. So we want to see where we are maybe in January. We may revisit that concept at a future meeting. But right now we feel like it's not in the best interest of the students to make a decision that's significant. And so now I'd like to introduce Andrew Priscilla, our high school principal. Usually we do highlights from our buildings, and we invite our administrative team to highlight for you with our students the good work that's been taking place across our district, but we have to do this differently because of the virus. So we're taking a different approach, and we are so appreciative of Andrew that he has agreed to go first. So I'd ask Andrew if he could just share with the boards some of the ways that our faculty and our administrative team have approached instruction at the high school level over the course of the past 2 months. So Andrew, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I think we missed our opportunity last spring when we went into remote learning. We're happy to be here and be first this year. So like all things, this presentation is a bit of an experiment with some videos embedded in here from teachers and students, and I hope we set a good example here for the first part. We're pretty excited. So with hybrid instruction, I've got a couple things to show you. So one is just a brief overview of the adjustments we've made to the invitation for in-person learning at the high school. And then I want to take you on a little bit of a whirlwind tour of a few departments and how we're starting to reimagine active learning in a hybrid model, and then update you on some of the social justice and anti-racism work that we're engaged in. So let's see if this works. Okay. So as you know, we started the year September 3rd with 3 cohorts of students, inviting 1/3 of the students in at a time for in-person instruction and having 2/3 out of school. That was determined by a careful analysis of the space we had and how we could socially distance in every single classroom, and that was a really successful start, allowed us to get our feet under us. And then October 5th, we changed to 2 cohorts of students, inviting half of the student population in at a time. At no time did we have a complete half coming in for in-person learning at a time. There was still a number of students who remained remote fully, either longer term or short term. But tomorrow we're starting our first day of full day instructions for students with individual educational plans and our English language learners, and we're really happy to be able to offer that for full day instruction for those students. Now, when you're in the school right now, many students have chosen to be remote given the cases that have happened, concerns over quarantining. So the number of students who are actually in the school is fairly low right now, which also gives us capacity to be able to do this, and we're just really happy to start that off tomorrow. So now if we talk about reimagining active student learning in a hybrid model, at Greeley we've really been pushing and working very hard and quite successful at engaging students in active learning, collaboration, everything from the technology that we're leveraging to the professional development that we've been engaging in, and to restructuring space and furniture is all focused in that. And now we throw into all of that work a hybrid model that requires everybody to be 6 foot distance from each other, a number of students at home, and we pack up a lot of the furniture and we put it in storage containers to be able to do this, and it resets the whole landscape. And now we're at the process of trying to reimagine how to do this sort of same interactive, responsive teaching and learning with the hybrid model. So the first place I want to sort of take a stop on our tour is in the math department, and using a technology or Jamboard technology for first feedback between students and math teachers. And in a regular situation with a math class, you'll see students actively practicing new skills that the teacher may have started to demonstrate. The teacher moves around the room, looking over shoulders, checking student progress and adjusting. By doing that, students get up at the front of the room, try out problems on their own. Students give feedback, and so now we have to reimagine what that looks like. Jamboard's helping us. So this is Glenn Wong, our math department chair.
Hi, my name is Glenn Wong. I'm the chairperson of the math department, and I'd like to talk a little bit about how we've worked with Jamboard. Prior to the pandemic, a typical scene in the math classroom might be a teacher circulating the room, crouching down beside a student to give them feedback, working together with a group of students to get feedback from them, and have students collaborate and work together. All of these things were challenging for us when we shifted to hybrid learning, and we needed to find a way that we could still accomplish these tasks without having the students in front of us or being able to approach them. So what Jamboard has allowed us to do is to provide students with feedback, as well as teachers receive feedback from our students, and also to have students work together. In this first example, we see here a student sample work from my classroom where I was able to provide the students with feedback, marking up their paper where every student could see the work. In the second example from Mrs. Valencia's class, several students have submitted their work to her so that she can receive feedback from the students to figure out where they are in the process of solving these word problems.
So what you saw there was actually some slides from class. That's literally what it looks like. Students will snap pictures of work that they're writing on hand, either in the class or at home. They appear all of a sudden on the board, and then the teacher can then go ahead and write over top of them as the student works through, and it's like a disembodied voice talking in the class, working through what they've just done. Students in class are watching it there. Students at home are watching it on their computers, and then the teacher can interact with that. And so it's a quick and instantaneous process of working on math at home and putting it up on the board and being able to look at it and make your thinking visible. This next bit, he talks a little bit about how collaboration is working with Jamboard as well, which is another really important part of that classroom.
In this third example from Mrs. Corman's class, we see that two students have worked together on polynomial function sketching, and something that they weren't able to do previously since it requires them to work together. And a huge benefit of Jamboard is that students can work together whether they're in the classroom or they're at home. So this has really allowed us to provide students with feedback and to see and monitor how they're doing even when they're not in front of us, and even when we can't approach them to give them direct feedback based on the work that we see in front of us.
So right now the students are all at home, all virtual, and they're responding whether they agree or disagree with this statement. So you can see their sticky notes. These are their thoughts being popped up, and they're putting them on the side. So you can see the little letter that's popping up because that student is working on that sticky note. So on our end, if we go here, you can see where all the students are at the top. Each one of those circles represents a student, so we can keep track of what slide on the Jamboard each student is at and what they're reading or what they're working on.
So what you're seeing there is students actually adding ideas, making sense of them, sharing feedback with each other, and then collaborating. And one thing that you find when you're working in Zoom with a whole bunch of students on a grid is, and maybe you felt this yourself in meetings, where there's sort of a reluctance to then talk, and conversation back and forth can sometimes be challenging in a large group as you're talking over people and that little highlight heights. So some of the software and some of these programs like Jamboard really facilitate students thinking through some ideas, posting them up, and maybe able to share and collaborate that way. We have a student who wants to talk a little bit about that here.
I think Jamboard provides the opportunity for us to connect with other students who we're not able to see on a day-to-day basis in the classroom, and it allows us to kind of bounce our ideas off one another. And some students might not be comfortable like sharing aloud or volunteering to answer a question. And I think by using Jamboard, it sort of provides a comfortable environment where students will put forth their ideas and their information in the classroom and kind of allow them to do that more fluidly and in a way where more students are bringing their ideas to the table.
We have found overall that Jamboard has really helped us to bridge the gap that we see in this hybrid learning and to overcome some of those obstacles.
So that's one way it's working really well in math and in some other areas as well. The next stop on our tour is the World Language Departments, sort of a neat departure from that, where we've begun a virtual classroom exchange with students in Costa Rica. So Siska Brutzar, a new assistant principal here, had taken sabbatical in 2018 to Costa Rica and then had made a connection there with a high school. And had in the back of her mind since then this idea of maybe creating an exchange program with them. And recently they've all been on Zoom, we've all been on Zoom, they're dealing with virtual learning, we're dealing with virtual learning, and she connected Isabel Herzari, one of our Spanish teachers, with the principal of the school who facilitated this opportunity.
Hi, my name is Isabel Irizarry, and I am a Spanish teacher at Greeley. So one of the great things to come along from the hybrid teaching experience has being able to be really purposeful about thinking outside of the classroom walls. Usually, we'd have a scavenger hunt through the campus, or we'd have students work on the patio. But this way, it really pushed me to think globally about what we can do for our students And a connection with Siska, the new AP at Greeley, really put that into focus for me. So we were chatting. Siska is a polyglot. She's also had lots of really positive multilingual, multicultural experiences. And she told me about her experience in Costa Rica. I was able to reach out to the school and we made a connection.
Es una playa, I don't know the word, hold on.
Say it in English and we can help you.
Yeah, it's not.
That's translated.
It's not close. It's far away. So.
Está largo.
Sí, sí.
I thought that clip was so funny. So they met in a big group, and then they used breakout rooms to be able to talk to each other. And the first meeting was really about just getting to know each other, getting comfort level, talking to people that you've never met before, who are now in a different, completely different country than you are. And then this collaboration will continue. And Isabel just sums up some of her points here.
So it's sort of like a technologically advanced pen pal.
Yeah, that's right. Live, at the moment, pen pal, practicing language skills and learning about each other.
So our Spanish 5 students are having real, authentic conversations about culture, about language use, informing their interculturality, and just basically being global citizens. And for me, that's been such an amazing experience. I hope the students continue to build different perspectives, to practice their language skills, their Spanish skills in this case, and just really be excited about making connections and doing whatever they can to, do the best for them during this time, which is a little bit different.
So the next stop is the science department.
That's a good question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
What level was that?
Spanish. That was Spanish 5 students. So students who are seniors going through, not going into AP. So in the science department, one big question that came up is how we're going to do labs. And the state, provided us opportunities so you could do virtual labs. They don't have to be in person to meet the lab requirement for our classes. And labs, created a significant challenge. There's the materials that everyone has to touch and then share from class to class, which was certainly an exposure risk for us. And then also to complete labs, it's a collaborative effort with group mates who are then in close proximity to each other, holding different pieces of the lab, measuring and all that, which also creates issues. And then there's an equity piece around students who could be in school performing labs in person versus students who are fully remote. So there's a few, like 3 programs that the science department is engaging with to conduct virtual labs, and there's a description of it, a little demo of what it looks like on the student end.
Hello everyone, I'm Paul Bianchi, the science chair at Horace Greeley High School, and I'm going to show you some examples of virtual lab work we've been using in science to give both our live and remote students some experience with lab skills. In the 9th grade, our living environment teachers have been working together to create their own videos of standard biology labs with some accompanying worksheets. So here's an example of a worksheet on an artificial cell lab, and here's a video that they made walking through the lab itself. Then in 10th grade, our chemistry and earth science students have been using Gizmo software, which lets them control various parameters on an animated simulation of some situation, and then run the simulation and graph the resulting data for analysis afterwards. So in this case, we're dealing with phase change as solids melt into liquids. In 11th and 12th grade physics, we've been using 2 pieces of software. One is Pivot Interactives, which is, again, a set of video labs, but this is a little bit more open-ended in that the students have to decide what tools to use and how to place them, and there's a little bit more left for the students to decide in terms of the data collection involved. And finally, we're using Vernier Video Analysis, which allows students to either use prepared videos or upload their own videos involving some moving object, and then they can simply track the motion of the object over time, and it collects position and velocity data, which then they can use to analyze the situation. So those are some of the things we've been using in high school science.
So what those virtual labs allow you to do is actually change some of the parameters of the laboratory experiment itself, take up measuring devices, run them, and then there's actually one added benefit here is the seamless sort of integration of the data collected and easily manipulated into charts and graphs for it to display it to analyze the work. In the next slide, this is just some pictures of lab demonstrations. This is Melissa Dolman, one of our science teachers here, who in these three pictures are doing it as sort of a demonstration lab for both the students at home and the students here. And I don't have a pointer, but you can see that what she both has. She's the audience here, and she has that one of the cameras that Josh Block has installed that's right up against the beakers there that she's using. And she has the students at home in the back, and actually some of the students in class are also on that Zoom there. And she's able to speak to both of them and do a demonstration that's visible both to the students at home and the students in class.
Andrew, can you anticipate that? I mean, obviously we want the kids as soon as they can back to doing hands-on lab experiments, but some of that software looks pretty cool. Do you anticipate that it would have a place going forward once there can still be hands-on experiments?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some of it, a portion of it has been in existence even before this because it's so useful. Some of it is new that we've added on and expanded the repertoire of programs. And then performing arts. So performing arts was really on theater, live stage interacting is a real challenge, but we are putting on a live broadcast performance of Almost Maine in December. And this is reinventing what theater looks like, where Josh Block actually made a connection with Rob Krause, our theater teacher, with the vendor who can help set this up. The students are actually going to be in their homes. And it's a series of two-person scenes, and they're going to be acting with each other while they're in separate locations in the evening for the performance. And they're talking about things like, okay, if there's a prop that they have to share, they're very simple. Let's say it's an iron or something. Both students have to have one at their homes. If they have to pass it back and forth, then also the technical parts of the theater are also included, where there's going to be like a virtual control room where there are going to be students who are directing as if it's a live television production in there, and they'll go to camera 1, split back to camera 2 based on the cues. And so the elements of directing, stagecraft, and acting are all involved. And so he talks a little bit about what this is like reinventing it in the time of COVID. This is Rob Krause.
So teaching theater in the time of COVID is kind of an interesting possibility because you have to pull an audible in certain ways, but in other ways things stay the same. So in theater we talk about being a truthful, organic actor, and we've kind of transitioned to on-camera work because a lot of the acting we're doing cannot be done up on stage, being socially distant. Actors need to see each other to be able to listen and to respond to each other, but they can do that on Zoom, and we have two actors facing each other, and they can listen and respond and get to an organic state the same way that you would up on the stage.
Action.
Yeah, he doesn't like it if I'm down here longer than I said I'd be, and I've been down here longer than I said I'd be.
Marvelyn picks up the ironing board. As she goes to put it away, she accidentally swings it around and hits Steve in the head, just as she did at the beginning of the scene. Steve gets knocked off the bench.
Ow!
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Ow!
I'm so sorry. Are you all right? I can't believe I just did that to you again.
Ow!
Wait, what did you just say?
The difference is that the actors have a real close-up of themselves. So in a sense, they're more vulnerable, and the acting itself becomes a little bit smaller than you would project out onto a big stage. But we're looking for honesty, we're looking for organicness, and we can do that no matter where, at what venue, or what location the actual acting has to happen in.
So that was a sneak peek at a read-through of a scene from Almost Maine, and that will be coming up on December 9th or 11th. I have to check the schedule. So that's just a brief run-through of some of the ways that things are being reinvented here, trying to balance, attending to students in school and students out of school, finding ways for them to interact with each other, leveraging technology to do this work, for feedback, and for being really responsive classroom where you get feedback from the students, adjust and change based on that, and continue. I also wanted to give you a little bit of an update on some of the social justice and the anti-racism work that's happening at the high school. This isn't by any means the full component or the full list of efforts here, but I know you're aware of some of it. I wanted to give you an update. So around the professional development around teachers, one big component here is our own learning, our own understanding of our own biases, our own thoughts and experiences that have brought us to a place where we see the world in a certain way. And so there's a lot of personal learning that's involved in this, which is the foundation for everything else we do. How we talk about difficult topics in class, how we address issues of race and equity within works of literature, and how we select appropriate materials and curriculum going forward. So Brendan, Frank, and Campbell Jones, who were part of our work all over the summer, have also worked with some of our faculty. So our department chairs had a chance to work with them in August. And then just then on November 3rd, our English department, our counseling department also had sessions with them. And Adam was great to facilitate that and bring them to them. They were a tremendous success. Found this very, very worthwhile. And it's really putting us on a great road for the kind of individual personal learning about bias, about assumptions, and about, they talk about the ladder of inference, where we go from collecting data, making assumptions about it, jumping to conclusions, and then acting, and talking about how do we sort of slow that process down, it's become so automatic in ourselves and others, and how do we engage in conversations when we're seeing that happening. Also with professional development, as you know, Dolly Chug came on November 3rd to our staff, our superintendent's conference day, and had a fireside chat at the beginning. The feedback, so I thank everyone for bringing here, this was just amazing. The feedback from our faculty is unanimously incredibly positive. Our faculty are saying this was the best speaker and presenter at a superintendent's conference day that they've had, period. These are veterans for well over 20 years who are saying that. And every single teacher has a copy of the book. Every single staff member in the school, the person you need to be. Thank God for making that available. And they're energized with it. So our department chairs are actually working through, we are reading the book together and unpacking it, and then also talking about and planning how we're going to roll this out, some of this work with systemically with 130, 40, 50 adults in the building. So we started at our last faculty meeting with a discussion of the fireside chat, and then we're moving forward with that, and that's been great. Some of the curriculum additions, and I know these were approved through the CSF grant, the board approved the purchase of these. One, that stamped, by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi, is in our English 9 classes and coming into our U.S. history classes, history of racist ideas in the United States. And the color of law, which was also recently approved, is coming into our AP U.S. government politics. It is a history of how housing practices have created segregated living arrangements within the United States that are really sort of intractable now, or almost intractable, but very, very stubborn, and the process by which that happened. And it goes into wealth inequalities and opportunity inequalities, and the explicit and implicit ways in which our landscape has appeared as it is today. So those are 2 books there. Here's one example. In the life school, SUNY Statistics and Public Policy is integrating data, local data and understandings of population changes and demographic changes from indigenous peoples in the area through the 21st century, and how those are shaped, and taking a look at public policy and statistics. We'll talk for a minute about that. And this is Nick Potter, one of our new teachers at Greeley.
Hi, my name is Nick Potter. I teach Statistics and Public Policy at the Life School. We started this year with a grounding experience at the intersection of data and statistics and public policy, which went hand in hand with the work the students were doing in community about This Book is Anti-Racist, which they were reading and discussing at the time. So in order to put in context their discussions from class, we wanted to discuss in statistics class what the identity of our community, Chappaqua, is. So we answered 3 questions with 3 groups. The first group about the identity of Chappaqua before colonization, the second group about demographic shifts and the public policies that caused that in the 1900s, and then finally, the last group investigated what is the identity of Chappaqua now. So the students in Stats and Public Policy class researched and put together 3 learning experiences for the rest of the life school in community class.
So there's just a snapshot of some of that work that's going on. And I'm thinking about next steps. So one thing we want to continue to do is to solidify what's working right now with hybrid instruction and continue to explore new innovative practices to bring to the table for our students. One particular piece that we're focused on now is engagement and participation, which is a lot of the tools, it's challenging, a lot of the tools that the teachers have developed over the years with students in the classroom, like a quick turn and talk, just to generate ideas and build momentum in the class for a discussion, or the use of a board that's really easy for students to sort of share their thinking, make it visible on the board, and have this, are complicated when we're talking about students in the class and at home, and then as we move into more and more students who are at home. So this focus on participation, students being willing to talk with each other, authentic conversation, and then all of those tools that teachers have built over years and years are being reinvented now. So that's a particular focus for us. And continued focus on social justice and anti-racism work. That will be ongoing throughout the year and beyond. And then now, and has been continued support for social and emotional health. And we know that one of the protective factors, we really believe in strongly, is having kids in the building in person. Being able to have social interactions, to get out of their homes, to get back to a sense of normalcy. And where, in recent weeks, we're moving, more and more students are at home and learning from home, which raises concerns for us for the social and emotional health, and also our ability to reach out and connect with students and be able to provide that. So that is a focus for us and essential to our efforts right now. So that's what we're thinking about as we're going into our next steps, and that's sort of our tour of how things are looking at Greeley right now. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
I'm just continuously amazed at how you all have reinvented curriculum at all the school levels, but it's really remarkable, and I know how hard you're all working, and it's incredible to see that the new methods of learning, which I'm sure the students take to very well, and they jump right in and seem to be engaging in that, and I'm very glad, because really the question I had, which you brought up at the end, was the social and emotional piece, because I think there are incredible benefits to, like, even just seeing that theater, like, they're learning all different aspects, they're gaining different skill sets, they're using different parts of their brain, different parts of their bodies in lots of ways that are incredibly beneficial. And they're very resilient, all of our students, and I know that, but, I just wonder how we are keeping up with their emotional well-being. And I don't know how we're doing check-ins or assessing that, but I'm very happy to hear, to see the focus on that as well. But I really continue to be incredibly impressed and grateful and blown away by the effort that's gone into it on the part of our administrators and our teachers to give them as rich an experience as possible. So thank you for that, and I look forward to hearing an update maybe in the spring and see how, but we are, like, that is one question, like, how are the counselors checking in? Are there resources for the kids when they might have a great week and then they might have a really terrible week? So how are you dealing with that at this point?
Sure. So, everybody at the school, our students, our faculty, our counselors, our administrators, our staff are working incredibly hard. Everybody is in. It's good. We're tired, but it's good. In terms of checking in, our counselors held sessions with all of their students in the beginning of the year to be checking with them. We also run a weekly meeting of administrators and clinical team and counselors to review students who have come to everybody's attention as being at risk. And that might be because of attendance or a drop in grade or a disengagement, or it could be a whole host of things. Right. So, and then action steps are created from that meeting. It happens on Mondays every single week. We've also done professional development within our faculty meetings, especially around help-seeking behaviors for faculty and for students, and how to identify and what to do with students depending on level of concern. And a number of our classes are emphasizing trying to stay connected with students. We've also trained, our student assistance counselor, Carolyn D'Agostino, has been trained in youth mental health first aid. So she went to multiple day training to become a trainer. And so she made presentations to each department to actually register teachers to take the training with her And it really is what you would call first aid training. So, in first aid, someone's hurt, what do you do just to address the situation there and get help temporarily while you seek a professional for help? And we're starting a process of training teachers in that. So, having sports every day is just fantastic for our students, and I'm thankful every day we can be open in person, and our extracurricular activities and running that on Wednesdays is also another opportunity for our students to come in. So we're working on it, and it's a priority.
Thank you.
You know what, I think it's so interesting how when we started off with the presentations, we were lamenting a little bit about how we had set everything up for these active learning spaces and all this collaborative work, etc. And as you continued on with your presentation, it occurred to me that what we had set out to do is exactly what's going on now, because we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation, and everyone has been so creative about how to piece this together and continue on with this mission that I don't think it's been a loss at all in many respects. I mean, of course, there's a lot being lost in the fact that everyone can't be at 100% in person all the time, but we really have to look at the bright side and see that we've gained so much with all of the new strategies that you've devised and the new technologies and apps, and we've gained a lot of knowledge that we can keep. This is not just for a one-time during the pandemic. The project going on with Costa Rica, the video pals, the lab work that's getting done are all techniques and strategies that we can keep going forward, even when we're back to normal. So there has been a lot that we've gained through this process, and I find it heartening that everyone's been so creative and has done so much work to get us to this point. I'm very, very grateful.
I'm grateful.
I don't really have any questions right now, but I'd be just curious to stay updated to see how the progress has been, and maybe at the end of the year, one of the concerns I have is how kids are doing, socially and emotionally, but also academically. Not just at the high school, K through 12, finding ways to see if they have fallen behind in some way. I mean, I'm sure that the whole country has fallen behind. And I don't know, I'm sure there are ways to assess that. I'm not sure what we can do about it. It's just the state of the world. But it would be an interesting thing to look at, important to look at.
At our next meeting, we'll have Dr. Max administration, so we can share with you some of the results from that process. We expanded it down to the lower grades further than we normally would, because we feel it's important, given what happened last March, to assess how students are doing at the first and second grade level as well. And there's a norming process that occurs not only with the state, but with the national average. So we can share it. That was part of our thinking in terms of our December meeting. That would be information that we'd like to share.
Great.
So process.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of creative energy happening and a lot of invention that we'll be able to take forward. I'd also say, and I said this to groups of parents and teachers in the summer as we were preparing to open, I said, you wouldn't design a school that's away from scratch. You wouldn't say, wait, we're going to have an orchestra that runs with 75% of the students at home and 25%. So the challenges in the new box we're in are creating some really interesting innovations. But I do know that everybody is really excited to be able to get back to full in-person learning at some point, which is going to be just tremendous. And then take what we're learning now, infuse it into that, and we'll be even stronger.
It just shows that we're always learning.
I'm sorry?
We're always learning, we're always being innovative, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew.
This is like the definition of necessity being the mother of invention, but that's some really cool stuff, and we've seen really cool stuff happening across all the grade levels, but just the fact that, taking the example of the kids Zooming with the kids in Costa Rica, that's awesome, and we probably wouldn't have come up with that but for having to come up with a creative solution, but I think it's so impressive that nobody's reaction to this has been, oh, well, we can't do it the way we're doing it, so it just won't be as good. Everybody's really stepped up and said, well, we can't do it the way we're doing it, so how do we do it, if not as well, then better? And this was really, it's really neat to see, and to see that there's definitely going to be stuff that when we are all back in the classrooms, which, hopefully sooner rather than later, that we'll still take pieces from this and say, that was awesome and we're going to keep doing it. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew.
So before we transition, I do want to share with you, we've ended the quarter, so I think it's important that I update you as we originally planned on our incidents that are related to hate speech, bias, and discrimination. I just want to also preface this with school's not operating as normal, and so that may or may not be reflected in the number of incidents that we've had to intervene and address. So just a reminder, when we changed our code of conduct, we created an intervention strategy by level for incidents that occur that our principals would follow in order to address hate speech, bias, and discrimination in a way that we felt was consistent across the 2 middle schools and the high school. And then we had a notification process in place where the principal would notify the community if an incident rose to the level of a superintendent suspension, and that the superintendent would notify the community if there was some kind of pattern that needed to be addressed. So just a very brief update, we've had 4 incidents that our principals needed to address across the district. One was at the elementary level. Obviously, there was much more discretion in how that was handled. 2 were at the middle level, and one of those incidents triggered a community outreach, and that was at Seven Bridges. And then we had 1 incident that needed to be addressed at the high school level since the start of the school year. So I did want to update you on that, because that was part of what we're going to do quarterly. At the end of next quarter, maybe this chart will look different based on what our principals have to address. But this is where we are currently in terms of incidents related to the adjustments to the code of conduct. Are there any questions about that?
Are you able to be a little more specific? It's falling under hate speech, bias, discrimination, and I guess I'm just curious, among the 4 incidents, was it all hate speech? Was it just incidents of bias? And is the bias obvious, objective bias? Is it implicit bias? There's a lot that's covered here. So
right. I would say that thematically the incidents all had an element of hate speech associated with them.
Okay. Yeah, because those are all very different. So you could say hate speech is different from, let's say, an incident of implicit bias. Because implicit bias sometimes, of course, needs to be addressed, but the intentions are also so different. So I'd be interested in seeing that
Differential by category?
Yeah, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think that absolutely is possible, but as we have more, if we have more incidents, it may lend itself to categorize them by incidents. But right now, in our current status, it doesn't based on what happened. And in each of these specific incidents, the principal interacts with me regarding the circumstances surrounding it, so we can make sure that code of conduct is being followed consistently.
Christine, yes. Something we haven't talked about was the concept of restorative justice. Has that come into play?
So at the secondary level, those are all embedded in the interaction with the families around the consequences as associated with the approach outlined in the code of conduct. Students who have decided to engage in that practice would still be in the middle of that process since it's year long. So perhaps at the end of the year I can let you know when students actually engage in that aspect of the discipline code in connection to the incident that they engaged in.
And that concludes the superintendent's report, so thank you. All I know that was pretty extensive, but I feel like it's important for you to hear what the high school is doing.
All good things. Okay, thank you, Christine. So let's move to committee reports. I know the policy committee has a lot on the agenda today, so if that's okay with you, we can get to it when we talk about it in the agenda, unless there's something you'd like to talk about now. But
No, I was going to jump in with the wellness committee.
yes, let's go to wellness.
We had our first meeting of the wellness committee over Zoom. It went well. It was actually a really good and productive first meeting, and we haven't worked through the specifics of what we want to roll out, but we're hopefully rolling out something by the end of the calendar year, and we're going to hopefully work with the PTA to get that rolled out. And what we've talked about is that often the wellness committee focuses on things inside the school buildings, and obviously that's not feasible this year. But we're also really trying to look at mental health and wellness and social emotional health and wellness this year in the midst of the fact that everybody's struggling and it's a really hard year. So it was a really good first meeting, and the committee came up with, I think, some really good ideas that we are now refining and hoping to have some resources available to the community by the end of the year, and we'll keep you posted.
Excellent. We have a communications committee report. I'm on the committee with Jane, so I'll let Jane go ahead and.
Yeah, so Vicki and I are members of the communications committee, and we normally meet with Christine, but this year we made a communications advisory committee, and we had our first meeting of that as well. Well, we had our second meeting of the communications committee and our first meeting of our advisory committee, both on Tuesday of this week, and it was really great. We have 3 community members who have joined us as part of this advisory committee. And the goal really is something that we've talked about for a while on the board, which is always seeking to improve our communication with our community. How can we do things better? What ways are you receiving your communication? What's working for you? What's not? Where are you looking? What are you looking to hear more about, less about, etc. So we have 3 members, community members on this from children in different schools. All 3 of them have a background that involves communication, so they really can act in an advisory fashion professionally, as well as community members and how they're viewing this with children in our schools right now. So our goal really, again, is to evaluate what we're doing well, what changes we can make so that our community we can engage better with our community, and that messages we want to get out are getting to our community members. They know where to get information, how to respond to us if they have questions, how to provide feedback. And so it was a really, I felt, productive first meeting with us and Christine and our new members. And we're going to be meeting again in January and soliciting more feedback. We have a couple of tasks we're going to work on and circle back on, but I thought it was very productive.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a great first meeting, and just to add to that, I think it's really a great opportunity to be able to draw from the talent we have in the community.
Absolutely.
And so I was very grateful to the 3 new members for giving us their time and their expertise. I really look forward to continuing the work.
Yep. No, it's very helpful.
Okay. And then we had a meeting with the CARES committee, which is our community advisory committee on anti-racism, equity, and social justice. So I'm on that with Holly, so I'll let Holly give an update on that.
So the CARES committee met on November 9th. It was our second meeting with the advisory committee. And we spent most of the time actually talking about some group norms to improve the environment and agree on how we want to interact with each other. Then we started a process called the SWOT analysis, where you take a look at your strengths, what you're doing well, your weaknesses, not doing as well. And then in our next meeting, we'll start talking about the opportunities and the threats, which is really looking a little bit outside of what we're doing now, but more in the environment. And Christine's been doing a good job of leading us through that along with Tony. And our next meeting is, I actually don't know.
I don't have my calendar with me now, but we do have
another
meeting coming
again.
up.
Did you want to add anything, Christine?
No, that's about it. Again, very grateful to all of those people who are helping us make the district better and continue to improve.
Oh, and we did meet outside, and it got very cold, so I think our next meetings we're going to leverage technology a little bit more to stay warmer.
Thanks, Helen.
And I also have a facilities committee report.
Okay, sure.
So the Facilities Advisory Committee met on November 10th, and that was the first time that we met as a larger committee, and we met by Zoom. We reviewed the status of the bond projects. The library is done, and everything else is moving along very well with Joe's leadership there. We talked about the security projects, which are all finished at all the schools other than Greeley. The Sustainability Center is through SED, and we're just, they need to finish up some paperwork there. Found out that the geothermal we've been looking into at 7 Bridges is a no-go, so we shared that with the community. And I have to admit that there really wasn't a lot of reaction to the geothermal. I don't think too many people were invested in that, so it's a small impact. We reviewed the solar project, which we talked about here. That's on a pause for pandemic and complications. And the last thing we discussed was a recommendation to the superintendent regarding field use over the winter season. Typically, from Thanksgiving through February, all of the fields are off limits. The lights aren't used for any situations. But the recommendation we made was for the turf fields and field C and the tennis courts, that those actually stay open a little bit longer into the winter, as long as they can still be used safely. I think they'll be open till about December 16th is the recommendation. So that's it. Our next meeting is going to be on February 2nd.
And one of the reasons why we want to keep the fields open longer now is because we want to encourage students to play outside rather than in these indoor facilities, because we see spread increasing in indoor athletic facilities. So we thought that this might be a way to encourage teams to leverage our fields, because I believe that it would be safer than engaging in athletics in these dome situations, because we've had some positive cases related to that.
Yes, thank you, Christine.
Yeah, that makes sense. That should be helpful. And you anticipate that students will keep using that despite the cold still go out there.
Yeah, and the use, I think, will be restricted to the field reservation system.
Right.
It's
Okay.
not open for public.
The only question I have is,
Officer.
I saw on the resolution that we're going to open it back up on Valentine's Day. I thought we were thinking about opening it in March.
And then we are going to reopen earlier, 2 weeks early. So both ends will add 2 weeks.
So around Valentine's Day.
So we'll reopen on March 1st rather than March 15th.
Oh, okay.
I think the original was February 14th, we pushed it out.
No, it's March.
March 1st. So
Just
I guess
double check the resolution, or the regulation.
So I guess the question is, that all depends on if the fields are capable of being used, correct?
That's true.
we're not going to have rec teams out there shoveling fields. So we need to be very cognizant of that. I also want to, share with the community, this is a regulation, so I could just basically approve the change. It doesn't need to go through a Board of Education process, but we usually change regulations based on recommendations from committees, which is why the Facilities Committee grappled with this and is making the recommendation to me, and I will change the regulation to reflect their recommendation.
Okay. And again, that was something that we were recommending for this particular school year. This is not intended to be going forward change necessarily.
Okay, good. Any other committee reports? No, okay. So let's move on. Let's move on to the public comment period. So we welcome public comments, and in respect of each other's time, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. And so if there's anyone who would like to come up for public comment, please do so. Come up to the microphone and please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kelly Mofield. I'm this year's president for the Chappaqua PTA. And my comments are short and sweet and all happy. They have to do with a lot of thank yous. Number one, I want to reiterate our thank you from the parent community to the administration, the district administration in particular, for your very hard work and ability to pivot and manage the situation and keep our schools open and just constantly being on the ball. We really appreciate it, and we do think that the parent community overall recognizes everything you're putting into it, and your communications have gotten better and better, and we appreciate you listening to us and being there for our kids. We also would like to thank you for including the executive committee of the PTA in your Superintendent's Day conference, where you invited Dolly Chung for the fireside chat. That was a great event for us, and as we are trying to secure Ms. Chung to come to speak to our larger parent community, and that was a great place for us to learn a bit about her and her book, and we've all read her book also, and it was additionally a good complement to our leadership training for the committee members and executive committee with the Campbell Joneses, and we appreciate you recommending them. Also, we want to, on behalf of the Special Ed Committee, because they are not here tonight, they're watching via Zoom or the live stream, but I would like to thank Ellen Dougherty for the meet and greets that she provided for each level of the school, parents and special ed community. I think they were fully attended, no seats left, and everyone really appreciated getting to know her and all that she's bringing to the district. And we would also, on behalf of the Special Education Committee, like to welcome Karen Smith, the new Director of Special Ed in 504, and our special ed chairs have spoken with them, and they're looking forward to meeting with them even more. And we appreciate that both Karen Smith and Ellen Dougherty both attended our special education webinar on Monday night on ADHD, and that's a great thing, and we always like to see administrators at our events, and that was a wonderful thing, and we appreciate their time. And then finally, I have an alumni shout out to Eric Strauss, who is a 1991 alumni of Horace Greeley High School. He's a critically acclaimed documentary filmmaker, and he came to our attention as someone who has dedicated his professional life since leaving Greeley and graduating from college to making films about eradicating hate and hate groups worldwide. And he did us the great favor of moderating the PTA's event with Christian Picciolini last night, and I think he was a great addition, and it was a nice thing to have a Greeley alumni, a special connection with someone who was familiar with the topic and passionate about the topic. And anyway, just not that he's zooming in for the Board of Ed meeting, but we do want to recognize him, and maybe some of his friends might be zooming in and can share that we publicly thank him for that.
Thank you very much, Kelly. We're very appreciative of all the work that PTA does on multiple fronts. Thank you. Okay, seeing that there are no other comments, tonight we will move on then to approvals and ratification. So let's go to accepting the minutes. I would like to take a motion to approve items 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4, which would be to accept the minutes of the October 26th, October 28th, November 4th, and November 9th board meetings, some of which were special board meetings and work sessions. We've been very busy this fall. I have a motion and a second.
I move.
A second.
Any discussion, any corrections or comments on the minutes?
I think everyone's been very busy this fall. Vicky?
Very busy. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we'll move on to the rest of this item, which are new policies. So we'll take them one by one. We'll start with item 3.5, which is policy 5080. I have a motion and a second for item 3.5.
Second.
Okay, so I will let the policy committee and or Christine tell us what the changes are to this policy.
Yeah, I'll talk. So I wonder if it might make sense, and I don't know, so I'm just going to suggest it. We have 5 policies that are all related to federal changes in Title IX.
So Christine, should we have a motion, so because we're supposed to move in second for discussion, which policies would make sense to discuss together?
3.5 through 3.9.
Okay. So can we redo that motion without withdrawing anything, Lisa?
Withdraw it and
Or can we just amend it?
you can amend it.
I move that we move 3.5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 to discuss at one point.
So we have to amend the previous motion
Yes.
on 3.5. So may I have a motion to amend?
You want to amend it to include?
Amend the motion on 3.5 to include 3.6, 3.7, and 3.8 as well.
3.9.
And 3.9.
I'll move to amend the motion.
No.
No, okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, sorry for the confusion.
Okay, and so now, thank you. So now we'll have a discussion on all those policies.
Okay. So,
Hillary and Warren, do you want me to begin?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
This is
It's
pretty.
just formality.
so I think 2 things, if you look at these policies thematically, you'll see that are different. The first is that there are different layers of intervention. So there's investigators, there's a coordinator, and there's a decision maker. And this is all tied to federal language. So there's more people involved in addressing issues as they come to the attention of the administration that may fall into sexual harassment or discrimination. And so that's the first piece of this. So when we get to the place where we are going to move forward and adopt these policies, which we need to do, you'll see a corresponding resolution appointing our administrative team to these new roles. The other part of this is that there's real clear language around how you need to report incidents and how they will be investigated and who has control over whether or not they're investigated. And that is also a departure from previous language. So, for example, there's much more control in terms of whether or not an incident is going to be investigated based on the victim's position. Where in the past, if issues came to the district's attention, they would be investigated irregardless of the victim's position. Hillary Warren, how am I doing?
Yeah. I think basically what happened is Betsy DeVos didn't like Title IX, and so took all the teeth out of it. And so the thing is that being in New York, it almost doesn't matter because the New York State laws and regulations around DASA are still what we would follow in like 99% of instances anyway, and also don't get too attached to the new policies because the new administration has already made clear that they plan to go back to the old way anyway. So we have to do this because the federal law says we have to do this. But the New York State law still gives us much more leeway to investigate things that aren't otherwise covered by the new federal regulations. And so we're still going to do it that way.
So, I mean, I suggest go through each of these and suggest that the board and the community can take a look at them also. We can take a look at, read these through. At the next meeting, we can make any changes, either adopt them then, or we can make changes without the adoption. But there can't be that much. There really can't be any changes because it's pretty much it's
Yes.
pro forma. Yeah.
So, are these all new policies that were breaking
just-
out? Something that was
Yeah, sorry, that's why I was hesitating. I wasn't sure which ones were new and which ones were revision.
Just,
So 3.8, 3.5, 6, 7, and 8 are policies that currently existed that needed to be revised. Are they completely rewritten, or is there a red line? They are completely rewritten, but I can have Margot provide you a red line copy so you can see the rewrites.
Except for 5052, right?
Well,
That would not.
that's not, she had a language attached to that particular policy.
But that one is pretty much the same.
Standard, yes.
Right.
The one policy that's new, which is important, is that we should have had a Title VI Civil Rights Act. And in this policy review to update the language, we discovered that this was missing. So I think what would also make sense, in addition to like understanding that 3.5 through 3.8, there's not a lot of adjustments that could be made because all the language is in statute. 3.9 is a new policy for us that I think is really important. And so if you are going to spend time really meaningfully providing feedback on one of these particular policies, that would be the one that outside of this meeting, I would really take a look at.
Because we have leeway to make some modifications there.
Not only that, but I think it's really important because it's about discrimination. And so I'd like you to just take the time to read that. So at our next meeting, our next policy meeting, if there are any suggestions to that particular policy, we can really grapple with that because this one is not as regulated as the other ones.
and I mean, we all get these before this meeting, so I know probably everyone's taking a look at them. However, I think you need to understand the background of what we were dealing with so you can really, we had the meeting until we saw these now. So we can all take a look at them, read them, digest them, we can either have a second reading and adopt, or a third reading and adopt.
Now, policy 0120 seems to increase the classes let me see. Sorry. Yeah, I have the red line copy. Yeah, it seems to expand the categories, the classes of apply, so that seems to make it easier for people to bring an action. Right, as opposed to other parts of the policy that you were referring to, right? So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly.
Yeah, it's really the Title IX stuff that, the Title IX changes have really narrowed the definition of what qualifies as falling under Title IX. And also how those investigations can and have to take place. So that's where I was saying that really DASA would govern more so, or in most cases versus Title IX.
So what's governing the changes in policy 0120? Is it federal law or something else? Because that seems to be expanding.
So it's both. So
Rights.
in the, based on the need to update this policy in conjunction with the new federal legislation, we updated the policy fully based on what we know we needed to do, because the policy didn't really reflect where we currently are, because it was antiquated in a lot of ways. So we're trying to address two things through one process.
I would like to say, I was going to ask that about seeing like a red line version, because I see like, I mean, it would just help me to sort of summarize like what are the changes in terms of procedure, or you can, it seems like you can choose to have something handled a certain way, but then there are different parties that are handling it, and it's a little confusing to see what was changed when I look at this.
You don't have the red line version? I thought we sent it to you. Let me resend it to you.
I only had a red line version of 0120.
Right, not all of
Okay,
them had
okay.
it. So that would be helpful just on all the policies. I would love to see a red line version.
Okay, 'cause the reason that you don't have it on 50, 80, and 90, 49 is because it's a complete overhaul. It's a complete overhaul of the policy.
So it would not be helpful to have a red line.
Yeah, and then the other ones are integrating language into those current policies. So we could do a side by side, but it would be.
Okay, no, but that's helpful even to know that. And I guess I'm still trying to understand like what teeth were taken out of it. You know what I mean?
The two things I remember offhand is, one is that it used to be, there used to be, I would say, more protections for victims versus the changes to Title IX have put in a lot more protections for the accused, including a right for the accused to confront the accuser and witnesses in person.
And is the appeals process different as well?
Yeah, and who oversees it, and
Right.
it has to rise to like a much sort of, I don't want to say higher threshold, because I feel like that minimizes what people make complaints about, so I'm trying to figure out how to say it, but it very much narrows the definition of what can qualify as a Title IX complaint.
But again, it's federally regulated, so there's not much we can do about it.
So our process in the past has been, we've introduced these policies to the board, and then offline, we've looked at them, we've provided comments to the policy committee. Policy committee has re-met in between meetings and made updates that have been presented to the full board through that process. So I think we should follow the same process for this particular issue, knowing that any changes need to be run through the attorney.
Right, because it may not be able to be changed in the way that we would like it to be changed.
So you're suggesting that the board send in their comments, the policy committee, you run it by the attorneys, and we'll come back at our next meeting and see if we're ready to adopt the policy.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Then we have the other policy.
Okay. So we're not voting on these items, we're just having discussion. So now I have a motion to, on item 3.10, to discuss policy 5085.
Christine, you can start.
Okay, well, I'll move to item 3.10. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now we have the discussion. So this is on student records, and you're recommending the first reading and adoption.
Right, so we've had a significant amount of records requests. And what's happening is that the district doesn't have a strong process for families when they need information. And so what we're seeing is that families are going to multiple people trying to get the information they feel like they need to support their children. So we want to create a streamlined process for particular departments so that parents know exactly who to go to if they feel like they need information about their children. So we have our Director of Special Education involved in the process, our Director of Literacy, depending on the particular need that the family has. And then we have our principals who will be the contact person for all other record-related issues. We also feel that at this point, it makes sense for us to do this either through an inspection process or through hard copies, because it's hard to, based on what we're trying to navigate, support the level and frequency at which the digital requests are being made. So in order to make sure that we complete the request that parents have, we feel that we need to gather documents in one location and provide access to parents to either review them or copies for them so we can make sure we fulfill their request. So that's why and this is an immediate problem, and so that's why we'd like you to consider adopting this policy tonight so we can move forward in a way that makes sense for both our families and our team that's trying to support our families, but we're having significant difficulty doing so based on the way that these requests are coming in.
So this will just really streamline so that when a parent has a request for any kind of student record or documentation, they know who to reach out to get it, and that we have record of it being, physically printed out or sent, as opposed to numerous emails flying back and forth and perhaps multiple requests and not having all the documents sent out together.
It sets specifics and boundaries.
Yes, so it should actually streamline things for both our families and for our staff. Great.
Could you speak to the last change to paragraph 3, the photographic digital image voice print? It looks like that was added, and I was just wondering, is that because of so much online learning?
It is. That's legal language that needs to be in the policy that was presented.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, and you're suggesting an adoption of the policy on the first reading because you're experiencing some difficulties right now in administering and dealing with all the requests.
And supporting our families.
And supporting the
Yeah,
families, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions on the policy or the request to adopt it today? Okay. So, so all in favor of adopting the policy at this time, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you. I recommend 4.1 instructional as presented.
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for 4.1.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I recommend 4.29 instructional as presented.
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for 4.2.
I'll second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, now we've reached our consent agenda. Permits the board to make more effective use of its time. We can adopt relatively routine matters with single motion. So today's consent agenda includes CSD summaries, APPR hardship waiver, contracts for educational services, consultant agreement for database support, full contract for student program, driver's ed contract, the appointment of the new library director, Andrew Farber, to NCCMC, and the agreement for COVID testing that our superintendent discussed in her report. So may I have a motion to approve? Oh yes, and we just had a very recent revision to our agenda, which also includes RFPs to engineering and other services related to the sale of Bizarro property. So at this time, may I have a motion?
I move that we,
Well, first of all, are there any items that anyone would like to remove from the consent agenda?
No, fine.
So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, which would be items 5.1 through 5.15?
I move.
A second. Okay, any discussion on any of the items?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Vicky? Just want to organize myself for the next meeting, so I feel like I need to update the community on the Zotter property and the RFPs and the sale of that property, so I'll do that on December 8th. And then I also will tease out the incidents related to hate speech, bias, and discrimination for the first quarter. So I just want to let you know that I'll come back to those two items at our next report.
Okay, great, good, thank you, Christine. Okay, and now we move to facilities, and we have one change order. This is item 6.1, a change order related to Southeast Mechanical Corp. May I have a motion to approve or to accept, to acknowledge the change order in item 6.1? Ellen? Second?
I'll second.
Any questions? Now, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And may I have a motion to acknowledge receipt of financials, items 7.1 through 7.4, which are the appropriation status report, the revenue status report, the claims auditor report, and the treasurer's report, all from October 2020.
I'll move 7.1 through 7.4.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, notice of future meetings. Our next meeting will be on Tuesday, December 8th at 7:30 p.m. at the Horace Greeley High School Auditorium, and on Wednesday, January 13th, 2021 at 7:30 p.m. where we will have our budget preview at the Horace Greeley High School Auditorium.
2021, it's on the calendar.
It's coming up. That's right. Who knows whether we'll be in person or by Zoom.
We'll be done with 2020.
Yes, at least 2020 will be in the rearview mirror.
Over, so we're getting there. Okay, and on that happy note, we have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn the meeting at 9:57 p.m.
Okay, I'll second that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Happy holiday, everyone.